Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to NYC Crime Spot, episode 4 of the Pergola Files. This is a special edition Q&A segment. We might do a couple of these. If we don't answer your question today, don't feel bad. I want you to keep going back to the community post on the channel. Keep adding your questions. And yeah, we'll probably do a part 2 of these. So let's get to the first question, Frank. This is by Big Pin 1. I think it's a good question. Big Pin says, what inspired you to become a cop, and what advice would you give your younger self when you first started?
Well, actually, the question is, why did I become a cop?
That is the question.
I became a cop because there weren't too many choices in my neighborhood when I was growing up. It was either a wise guy, a cop, or a fireman. So I saw a lot of my friends that I grew up with wearing very expensive clothes, but with bullet holes in them. And I needed the security for my family, too. So that's why I became a cop.
So, Frank, this is a DeMeo crew question. This is, what homicide related to the DeMeo crew shook you or affected you as a seasoned detective the most? And this is from Scott Marsh.
It's not a question of what got me so upset or anything about these murders, because I was looking at murders for many years and looking at dead bodies and going to autopsies. It's like it's part of your life, and that's what it's all about.
Is there's so in you say there's like 79 or whatever the number may be. Is there one that stands out to you at all? One that
Well, one in particular, because it was so big. It had to do with the Gambino Cuban crisis back in '79, which ended up to be 5 murders. It, that was a little immense. I mean, they dismembered 5 bodies after killing them and stealing their coke in the basement of Anthony Center's house, in a secret room that they had. They picked these people up from Florida. A guy named Podnick, uh, Mr. and Mrs. Serrano, and their bodyguard, and a couple of kilos of coke. And they drove them into Anthony's house, put him in the basement, and proceeded to kill all 5 of them, or 4 of them rather. And in the shootout, apparently the Cuban had a gun. He was a bodyguard, so he shot Rosenberg, and he was required to go to the hospital later. He said he was robbed in the street or something like that. Anyway, I mean, just think of it. This is a big job. I mean, there's 4 people here that you got to cut up, dismember, put it in Anthony's relatives' junk truck, and bring it out to the Fountain Avenue dumps and dump the bodies. Then the very next day or two later, Podnick's son comes to New York looking for his father, and they grab him and chop his body up and take it out. It wasn't so much the murder; it was just the scope of it. And 4 years later, I had to go to Florida, find his wife in Miami, Muriel Podnick, a wonderful woman. I mean, she lost a husband and a son. And now I had to convince her to come to New York. And I had a way with words, I guess, at that time. And she agreed to come. She came in for the grand jury, took her back to the airport. She came in for the trial, and she testified. That's about the worst thing I remember. But later on in life, I mean, I was in a Brooklyn South homicide in the '90s, and we had like 9, 10 precincts that we responded to, and in the Hasidic community in the 6-6 precinct, there were murders that could have upset the normal person. I mean, they weren't murders, but they were they were called, I don't know, something about to do with children being killed in the custody of their parents. Apparently, these people slept with their children and then rolled over on them and asphyxiated them. that was hard to take. But, you had to go on.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Going back to Rosenberg and the Padnicks, if I remember correctly, Frank, were these families associated with each other? Was this was a family that Harvey knew growing up? Is that correct?
You mean the Podnicks?
Yeah.
Yes, they knew them in Canarsie. I think they were in the auto glass business, and that's why they connected. That's why Chris went to Miami to meet with him to make a connection with this. And then he used the name Chris DeMayo instead of Chris Rosenberg as the guy that made the deal for the drugs. And the Cubans knew the name, and that's how the crisis started. I mean, that developed in all those murders, and two more after that. I mean, you had Bergucci got killed, and because the mayor thought he was a Cuban, and it goes on, and then Rosenberg got killed too over it. So that's two more besides the five.
All right, let's go to the next question. Okay. This one is from Norman McDonald. Were there any serious or credible threats to yourself or your close colleagues? Many thanks.
None at all. None at all. I mean, I was highly respected in my neighborhood. Everybody knew who I was. I always treated my prisoners, I never roughed them up. I mean, I'm the guy that pulled Joey Testa's face out of the toilet bowl and got Henry Borelli up out of the grease, put cuffs on him. And their comments were to me, no comment, and I accepted that. These guys and all the other wise guys, they had a motto: you do the crime, you pay the time. That was their life. That's that life.
Okay, this is from Tony Soprano. Tony Soprano says, Frank, should Henry Borelli be released?
Henry went to jail for 180 years for auto crimes. We got his fingerprint on a car in Kuwait, and that was the censure to Big A, and he went to jail with Freddie Denane. Do I believe he should be released? No, because you know what? He was originally indicted for two murders, Falcaro and Daoud. And sometime after that, they reversed that conviction for the murders because they weren't U.S. citizens. That's amazing. So, I mean, I know he's trying to get out. Everybody deserves another chance. I understand that. But these guys were involved in 79 murders, for which they only used in the trials, and they only used like 42 of them. That means 37 of them weren't covered under the double jeopardy. And I said, why didn't the state's attorney in New York, they dropped the ball. I mean, they accepted the sentence of life with no parole. Well, 35 years later, they walked out. But if they took one of those cases and prosecuted it in the state with three informants who were available at that time that weren't in contact with each other and couldn't be given the same stories, they could have convicted them and got convicted of 25 years to life to do the sentence if they ever got out of jail. Or being released in 2024, or they will them back to jail for another 25 years. But it is what it is.
Well, that would lead to our next question, because somebody also asked, what is your opinion on the release of the Gemini twins, Anthony Center and Joey Testa?
There again, I mean, I spent 6 years of my life building 79 cases, which were beyond a reasonable doubt. And they were involved in almost every one of them. Should they have gotten out? Not in my opinion. That's all I got to say about that. I mean, I know they're kind of older now, and I hope they're staying in the house and not getting involved in anything.
Frank, this question is from Rios Chavez. Did you ever deal with Tommy Bilotti?
Tommy Bilotti? No, I knew about Tommy Bilotti and Joey Bilotti. Tommy was killed with Paul Castellano. He was his chauffeur. I never met them. Never met Gravano either.
Is that right? Okay. right. Frank, what is your opinion on Michael Francis? That's from G24 Thin.
Michael Franchese and his
Yeah, what's your
podcast, you
opinion?
mean? I always thought of I don't know him personally either, but I always thought of him a gentleman. He was well educated. His father was a disaster, but his father almost got him killed. You know, I think he was pretty accurate in his podcast. Gentleman.
Okay. Tony Collins, 5195. Frank, out of all of the criminals you met, who would you say was the most intelligent and probably could have made it in the legitimate world?
I can't think of one.
No master criminals?
I can't think of one.
Well, let me add something to that question,
Well,
Frank.
then, you know, I didn't met him, but Michael Franchese could have fell into that category.
Right, right. But what is it about a lot of these guys? A lot of them are not educated, but some of them had the ability to like amass millions of dollars. You think that translates somehow if they would have put their mind to something, or they're just criminals and that's why they made the money?
Just think of what a world that would have been. I mean, you would have you would have saved thousands of murders in the 70s and 80s, you know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Yeah, we thought it was all over, but apparently what's happening in the last couple of days, they're still
Yeah.
out there working.
Yeah. Yeah. Some indictments came down with the NBA and poker games, all types of crazy stuff going on. Okay. So Tom Carl, 8021. Frank, did you know Detective Randy Jurgensen?
The name is familiar, but I can't place a face on it. No.
All right. He says he wrote a book and he said his story is extraordinary. Okay. So this is from Paulie Dibbs, 9028. Frank, when did you first learn that Greg Scarpa was a federal informant? Was there ever any rumors about him going on?
Everybody knew it. You know, he was in a federal informant for over 40 years. He was getting inside information that was allowing him to whack any potential informants of him. I mean, he got shot. Got shot in the eye. Ended up dying of AIDS from a blood transfusion from somebody he didn't even know had AIDS. The guy didn't even know it when he gave it to him. Anyway, that's a whole other story. I mean, you're talking about 3 Colombo wars that went back into the 60s. That the family destroyed itself. They killed over 100 members of their family. You know, in the 60s, it was Gallo and Persico fighting, and there were 30 murders with that. And then there was a second war, and there was 20 murders with that. And then when I was in the Brooklyn South Homicide Squad in the 90s, there was another 19 that we were running on. So, I mean, that it was the smallest of the 5 families. And that's a whole other story, though. You could do a whole show on that.
So it was no surprise when the whole world found out about it. You were like, yeah, I know that already.
Yeah, that was something that was well known.
Frank, over the years, there's also been rumors that maybe one of the Persicos might have even known for a long time, but they just left it alone.
It's possible I couldn't verify that, though.
Yeah.
I mean, Persico was involved in every one of those 3 wars. You know,
Yeah.
with Gallo, with Colombo, and then with Orena.
Yeah. Yeah. This is from Luke Meister. Luke Meister says, hey, Frank, I know it's hard to remember all of the smaller players, but do you remember a guy by the name of Herman Weisberger? He was indicted for racketeering with Castellano and DeMeo with the car operation. This is an old guy, I think, in his 60s, Frank.
Yeah, he's a little known player, but he was involved in flea markets, a little known enterprise of organized crime, and he was associated with a guy named Hellman, Saul Hellman, whose daughter Judy Hellman was bribed by the DeMeo crew in the murder of the Ippolinos, and we had her indicted later on in the Castellano case. So yeah, I knew about Herman.
Okay, this is another question. This is a question about somebody who I know that you know that I know. This is a question that asks, what do you think of Pete the Pick LaFrosia?
Not too much. I mean, he got a lot of people killed. I mean, going back, and he was a guy that didn't show up in the Gemini too often. I think he was scared to go. Anyway, he's still alive and well, and now he's doing podcasts.
This is true.
What did I think of him? Not too much.
Okay. This is a question from G78. This is a little person that we spoke about recently on the phone. This is something that I stumbled upon a few years ago. So let's go into this topic, Frank. G78 wants to know, what can you tell us about Constance Burke? What are your suspicions about that case?
That's a very big story, and I really didn't learn about Constance Burke until 2021, when I was retired in Florida and I was helping myself, another detective, retired detective Tommy Dage, and another detective Joseph Ponzi. We're helping the cold case squad in New York City Police Department with some old unsolved organized crime homicides. In fact, we solved another 23 of them, 17 of which the mayor did, which came to light later on from Dominic, who was still alive in 2021. The boss of that cold case squad in 2021 sends me an article that he dug out of the paper, an old article about a woman named Constance Burke, who at 3 o'clock in the morning was leaving the Gemini and disappeared. Apparently, she was at some time a barmaid in the Gemini, and she was thought to be some kind of an informant. I don't know. I never verified that, but again, I didn't find out about it until 2021. Now, if you go back to when we arrested Vito Arena, Vito Arena was arrested in Long Island by an off-duty robbery squad sergeant by the name of Stevie Marks. Great guy, great detective, knew him well. Anyway, he was in a restaurant with his family. He was off duty, and in comes Joey Lee and Vito Arena. He recognizes them from all the robberies that they were doing in Brooklyn, of doctor's office and dentist's office. So he calls his office. He don't even have a gun, and he has his men respond there, bring him a gun, and they take down Joey Lee and Vito Arena. So they move him into the jail on Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, to await arraignment for the next day. So we get word of this in the task force, and go to Walter Mack, and he gets a writ from a federal judge to take him out of state custody and bring him into federal custody. So that's done. We're in 2 cars. Joe Coffey is in a car with one of his 6 Irish phantom detectives that work with him, but we never saw throughout the whole years that we were working in this task force. Anyway, he's in a car with him, and myself and Artie Ruffles are in another car. So we present the prisoner, we put him in a room, and he wants a deal. He's looking for witness protection, so he tells us about the Joe Scorney case and how he murdered Joe Scorney, put him in a barrel, put him out of Cinema Riches. We later recovered the body, and that's verified. Now we put him in a car. Joe puts him in the car with him and his phantom detective, and me and Artie get in another car. And apparently he confesses to killing Constance Burke, him and Roy DeMayo. What happens to that information, I couldn't tell you, because Joe never notified the task force. Told us about Scorney, but never told us about that. So in all the times I met Vito to verify the other homicides I was working on, I never even knew about Constance Burke. Again, I never found out about her until 2021. And when the sergeant, Danny Geritano, goes and looks for the case, there's no case folder. We go look for the missing persons report. There's no missing person report. And I'm retired, and I'm living in Florida and trying to manipulate all this information. There is a newspaper article about her body parts being found. And there is an obituary, but no police department report relating to her murder. Another mystery. I mean, this is about the same thing happened with the Chico homicide. The folder's gone. Nobody knows what happened to it. The evidence is gone. Well, I'm retired in Florida now. Danny Geritano calls me again, and he's retired. Somebody reached out to him. There's another case of a missing file. Somebody reached out for him. An official of the Detective Endowment Association was at a racket and met this older Italian gentleman who asked him to look into his daughter's murder. Her name was Maria Piazza. So Danny reached out to me because the girl had a store on East 97th Street in Canarsie, which was near Gifkin's Bar, where Lucchese crime family hung out. And he thought maybe the father was just being Sicilian and was involved in organized crime, and he asked me to take a look at it. So I said, well, what are the conditions? So he tells me the girl was stabbed 23 times. I said, Danny, that's a crime of passion. That's not an organized crime hit. I said, 23 times, 23 years old. I said, and she was waiting to get married. I said, you should be looking for an old boyfriend. So we started looking for the case, and it's 2 boxes full of information from 1981, all gone. But all that's left is like 6 or 7 reports from the fingerprint unit in the police department, which indicates that there's a fingerprint and blood found at the scene and a handprint. So I said to Danny, well, why didn't somebody take that fingerprint now that's in the blood? They didn't have DNA back in 81, but now they have DNA. They can go back 30 years. You submit it and put it into the system if they can identify it and maybe come up with a perp, even with the handprint. There's things that can be done. You know what? You can't. My job's changed. I mean, I left at 95 and it was going down then. That's the reason I had to leave at 57, because I had a disability that they said I couldn't work anymore. So I had to go. I could have stayed till 62, but I didn't. But my job changed. Nobody's really interested in murders anymore. They have a cold case squad. I don't know why.
Back to the Constance Burke thing, Frank. So what strikes me as odd is, first of all, the missing persons report is lost. We know there's a missing persons report because the mother went out of her way to contact the press. In the Daily News, they even reported it, that there's this mother looking for her daughter, Constance Burke. So that's funny. That's funny to me. The second thing that's funny to me is that whoever in law enforcement, whether it been Joe Coffey, whoever it was, leaked to the press also that Vito Arena mentioned Constance Burke, because there's also an article at that time. So we have that information leaking to the press. We know there's a missing persons thing. So the whole thing is just effed up.
I spent a lot of time on my retired time trying to find that case. And Danny Geritano he was retired too. He went back into the police department and tried to find it. He went to the 6th precinct, looked through their storage unit. Again, we couldn't find a missing person. It was all gone. It's gone. We spent a lot of time trying to look for it. We couldn't find it. It's just like the Chico, and I guess there's a few other ones out there that we don't even know about. I can only guess what happened.
Frank, this is from Tony H9773. Frank, did you know of the murder of Whitey Tropiano in Bath Beach on April 2nd, 1980, who was part of the Colombo crime family?
Name again?
Whitey Tropiano.
I didn't know personally of him, no.
Okay.
There were, what year was that now?
1980, Bath Beach.
Yeah, no. No, it's not ringing any bells.
Okay. Luis Arias asks, Frank, did Roy DeMeo look crazy or scary in person?
I only saw him from a distance. Did he look scary? No, he looks just like he's a regular wise guy. I mean, they all have the same look.
A lot of DeMeo crew questions, of course. So Foley Santa Maria asks, who was the most interesting out of the non-main players of the DeMeo crew? So I guess what he's trying to say, with outside of Roy DeMeo, Gemini Twins, Henry Borelli, is there anyone that catches your eye in the crew? Maybe like a low-key guy who was more active and more big than people might think?
No, I think we had the attention on all of them. They were all vicious. He was surrounded by shooters. Some of the players that weren't up front was like Carlo Profeta and Paul Dardell, Paulie Pinto. They weren't as vicious as the other people.
What's Paul Dardell's story?
Paulie Pinto, I don't know. He's just car thief, and he just was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Somebody wants to know, you recently mentioned, so Mark Bird 18 wants to know, you recently mentioned something about a book. I don't know how much you can talk about it. Do you know when this book might be coming out? Apparently there's some information about you in it.
There is a book coming out November 25th. I can't say too much about it until after it's gone out. It's a book containing stories by myself, an FBI agent that I work with, Tommy Days, another detective I work with, and a few other investigators. Should be very interesting.
Sounds very
But you know what? People are looking for books. I mean, I was mentioned in there was another book I was mentioned in which came out recently by a guy named Canal, Blood on the Badge. That makes very interesting reading. That's a rewrite of Friends and the Family. And I mean, what the heck? People say I should write a book. I did. Murder Machine was the Bible of organized crime murders. You couldn't do any better than that. Jerry Capisci did a bang-up job writing that book. And, if it wasn't for that book, the Castellano case, the Westies case, the commission case, in those years, you can check my figures, but I think the murders were in the thousands. After those three cases and the book came out, I think organized crime was decimated.
It's also a book that is like billed as like the scariest book ever written about the mafia. So it has like a real lore to it as a brutal book. It gives people a lot of insight into more of the nastiness of that world. And it's just really, it's like a horror book at the same time. You have a copy with you that you showed me before. What is that?
Yeah, it's actually, look at this book. I mean, I never read this book when it first came out. This is Murder Machine. This was my copy given to me by Jerry Capisci. I don't know if you're going to be able to read it. He wrote this on the inside cover. And what it says basically is, to Frank, a homicide detective who got Dominic to walk a mile for a camel. Look at the condition of this thing.
Yeah, wow. It's like an old Bible over there. Yeah, you got a good relationship with Jerry. I was looking back on Gangland News.
I still have a relationship with him. I was ordered by the chief. Look, Jerry found out about the indictment, the pending indictment, way back in the 80s. And Walter brought him into the office and said, look, Jerry, we can't divulge anything that's going on in the grand jury. We know you know about it. If you promise not to divulge any of this information, when the case breaks, we make sure that you'll be getting all the information up front. So Jerry agreed. And ever since that day, I remained a friend of Jerry's. I mean, after the case in 1989, I was sent back to the major case squad. The chief of detectives ordered me to cooperate with Jerry. He come up to my office and we went through all my files on the murders. And I helped him write the book in a way. And still today, he calls me looking for information, or I call him, giving him some information. He's a stand-up guy. Another guy. I know. I stayed in contact with him. I stayed in contact with Walter Mack and an agent by the name of Tony Nelson that I still am very friendly with. Tommy Dage is another guy I speak to every day. He was a very active cop.
Frank, this is a funny one. So this is a question from It Just Me KG. Can you ask Frank when he started using the phrase, "You can't make this shit up"?
I don't know. I had a lot of interesting arrests. I mean, even in uniform, narcotics. I'd like to go over those someday. You know, some of them are funny. You know, but I think I really started using it with the DeMeo case.
Okay. Okay.
It's hard for the general public to even conceive that these things were going on. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I had
No,
tickets to the
it's
greatest show on earth.
yeah. Yeah. Wow. Good way to put it. Yeah. No, it is very hard to conceive. I mean, obviously you lived it, you were there, you had to aid in the prosecution of all this stuff, but yeah, when I first heard it, Murder Machine, it definitely changed the way. I said this before. It changed the way that I looked at crime, changed the way that I looked at New York City as a whole. Just absorbing all that information and seeing what people are capable of. Can only imagine you chasing these guys. All right, here's a question from Half Day of the Jackal. How insane was Anthony Gaspipe Casso?
That's another story that could take all year to tell. I mean, he confessed to like 30 murders when he was in custody, and they were going to use him to testify against Gotti, but in the interim, they grabbed Gravano when they thought that his information on Gotti was better than Casso's. Casso was crazy. He was just as crazy as Roy, just as dangerous. He got shot himself on a contract from Quack Quack Ruggiero to a guy named Paradiso over an argument over a big drug deal that they had going on in the 70s and 80s, in the 70s anyway, that ended up in Terry's dream. So Quack Quack wasn't satisfied with his take on the drug deals, and he wanted to whack Casso. Shot him, but he survived. And then he went after the people that tried to murder him, and he got almost every one of them. Don't forget, he's the guy that him and the Chin were pissed off about Castellano's murder. That Gotti and Gravano took out of Boston without the commission's permission. It was a coup.
So the guys that shot Casso, obviously, as he's spoken about, they caught up to Jimmy Heidel. He murders him in a house. Bob Bering becomes a cooperator. Now they end up killing the wrong Nicky Guido. On Christmas Eve, there's the Nicky Guido who they think is Nicky Guido, Louis Ippolito, or whoever gives bad information.
Yeah, that was Caracapa's mistaken ID of the perpetrator. Same name as Guido, an innocent kid.
Do you have an opinion as to who were the gunmen that did that Nicky Guido job, the mistaken identity?
Who shot him?
Yeah.
It was Testament Lasarino.
Okay.
Same weapon was used in a lot of other murders. Always a 380. And then there was a guy named Rendini who died. He also was a tool and die maker. He used to make the silencers for all the 380s. So they shoot somebody, then change the barrel and have different ballistics. So they could never prove it was the weapon. The only gun we ever recovered was a gun that Freddie Denane told us he used in a homicide, and he dumped it in a sewer in Brooklyn, and we found it. And we dug it out of this mush and submitted it to ballistics, and they couldn't verify it with any shooting.
One more question as far as prosecuting these things. Joey Testa and Anthony Center, they get sent away in 89, where it looks like it's going to be life. As we spoke about, they got out. Federal prosecutors, the FBI, based on anything Casso said, based on anything anyone has ever said, have never tried to prosecute the Gemini twins for anything they have done with the Lucchese crime family. Do you have an opinion on that?
I don't know if I mentioned this before. I mean, while they were on trial, they were doing murders for Casso.
That's
I mean,
that's
they're
basically
the
what I'm
guys that
saying.
killed. They're the guys that killed Roy DeMeo on Casso's orders from Castellano. They're the guys that in 1986 they killed a guy named Rezinikov, who was a Russian boss and was trying to take over the Russian mob from a guy named Bagulio, who was Casso's associate at the time, and they were making millions of dollars on gas tax and stolen diamonds from Africa. So this guy Bagulio goes to Casso, says this guy's trying to take over our action. And he sends Joey and Anthony after him. They clip him in front of Odessa restaurant on the boardwalk. That's in 1986. Then they're still on trial in 1988. And a guy named Rotundo, who's the Cavalcante guy, is trying to open up a cement business in Coney Island, which pissed off Casso to no end. So now he has to have a sit down. And Gotti sends Gravano to adjudicate this thing. And Gravano sides with Rotundo and says he can open it. And Casso says, okay. He gets Joey and Anthony. They go after Rotundo. They get him in Mill Basin, kill him in his driveway. Again, you can't make this shit up. Federal prosecutions, they did what they could do, and after 35 years, both of them got out. After all those murders, after 20 years of committing crimes, I can only think that they thought that they served the right amount of time for 79 murders. I mean, I don't believe that. And then committing 3 murders while you're on trial, which they never got prosecuted for. Nobody wants to go after them. Time served. That's it. Case is over.
Is there anything else that you want to say to the audience in general?
No, just thanks a lot for watching. Keep in tune.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, as Frank said, thanks a lot for watching. We appreciate it. I hope you liked this Q&A. Please leave a comment down below. If you have any more questions, please refer back to the community post, which is asking you to ask questions. So hopefully Frank can answer them. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good night.